A biotechnology company is hired to maintain the green fields of a luxury golf club on an isolated island in Montreal. They apply their most advanced fertilizer, which melts the snow and keeps the grass green in winter, so the rich can play golf all year round. The next day, in the city, security guard Dan carries supplies to his house. A fanatical survivalist, he always prepares for the worst and follows a conspiracy theory radio program. That night, Dan practices starting a fire without matches but fails, so he uses gunpowder from a shotgun shell, causing a small explosion that burns one of his eyebrows. Meanwhile, Michelle, the biotech owner, shows off the lawn quality to a wealthy couple. Patricia, Dan's daughter, works as a caddy at the golf course. But underground, the fertilizer spreads, contaminating the drinking water. Jacques, an actor, drinks a glass of tap water in his studio, unaware of the danger. In a grocery store, the water washes fruits and tools and is used to spray perishable products. Later, Jacques feels dizzy but ignores it. At home, he notices his teeth turning green and his stomach making strange noises. When he finds his wife in the bathroom, and he devours her flesh, turning her into a zombie too. As they sit in hot water, their eyes turn green, and they become paralyzed. Back at the club, Michelle and the wealthy couple find the place deserted and get scared. A dog appears, and when the woman calls it, the animal suddenly lunges at her, sinking its teeth into her neck. Michelle and the husband pull the dog away, but more zombies approach. The woman stops moving as her body changes. The two men rush into the building, locking the door behind them. Despite this, the dog sneaks in and bites the husband's leg. Before long, the husband also turns and goes after Michelle, who runs to the kitchen and grabs a knife to defend himself. Meanwhile, in the city, Dan gets a call from an elderly lady complaining about noisy neighbors. When he arrives and rings the doorbell, the neighbors slam against the door, revealing they've turned into zombies. At the same time, the old lady transforms and lunges at Dan. He quickly retreats to his car and tries to call for help, but no one answers. As more zombies surround him, Dan attempts to contact Patricia, but she doesn't pick up. She's too busy running from zombies. Worried about his daughter, Dan ditches the company car, grabs his gun, and takes his own car to find her. Nearby, young Andre is about to prepare milk for his baby sister Annie using tap water, but his mother warns him to use bottled water to keep her safe. Andre, however, refuses to drink water himself, preferring soda. Shortly after, his mother feels dizzy, but Andre thinks it's just from her workout. Moments later, she turns into a zombie and chases him around the house. Terrified, Andre runs outside and falls, but just as his mother is about to catch him, Dan runs her over with his car. She's injured but still alive. Andre wants to help, but Dan stops him, warning that emergency services aren't responding. He tells Andre to stay hidden and drives away. Andre, unwilling to abandon his mother despite her infection, drags her back inside. He quickly locks the doors and tries to call for help, but all he hears is a recorded message stating the island is on lockdown. Meanwhile, at the bridge connecting the island to the mainland, police block anyone from leaving. Soon after, Andre's mother tries to bite Annie, but Andre shoves her away and locks her in the bathroom. Inside, she notices water dripping from the shower and climbs into the bathtub. Meanwhile, Annie's cries attract zombies to the door. Desperate, Andre wraps her in pillows, a blanket, and a teddy bear until her cries become muffled. Shortly after, Andre's cat sneaks back into the house through the pet door. Suddenly, a zombie sticks its arm inside, almost grabbing Andre. He runs to another room, and the zombie freezes in place, only moving again when Andre returns with a golf club. At the workshop, Patricia finally manages to call her father. Dan rushes to help, encountering a horde of zombies. At the same time, the police at the bridge retreat as the military arrives. Aircraft hover above, preparing to bomb key areas of the island, cutting off electricity. The next morning, Annie's caretaker tries to reach the island, but is stopped at the bridge. Meanwhile, Andre watches the undead through the window but gets distracted by a government news broadcast. The public security minister claims everything is under control, but moments later, Andre's phone dies from lack of charge. Turning to his mother, he sees her covered in green slime. Suddenly, Annie crawls toward her, and the mother lunges to bite. Thinking fast, Andre makes noise, shaking a vegetable she loves to distract her. The mother stumbles and accidentally knocks over the television, crushing herself. Heartbroken, Andre drags her body into the bathroom and notices grass growing from her wounds. He climbs a ladder to check outside and confirms that under the sun, the zombies are completely motionless. Tired of isolation, he knows he has to do something. He grabs the golf club and places Annie in a baby carrier before opening the door. The zombies immediately notice the cat and chase after it. Taking advantage of the distraction, Andre sprints toward the convenience store, but the undead are right behind him. He struggles to open the doors and is about to be caught when one suddenly swings open. Dan pulls him inside just in time. Dan arrived the day before and set up a makeshift camp, but he has no plan. With no boats available and the freezing river as the only escape, survival seems impossible. Meanwhile, Andre searches for baby formula while Annie explores the store and stumbles upon a zombie locked behind doors. It's Patricia. She's infected, but Dan keeps her close, hoping she can be saved. At the golf course, Michel reinforces the doors and uses a radio to communicate with his team at the biotech company. They inform him that specialists are on the way and instruct him to follow protocol. Back at the store, Dan struggles to start a fire, so Andre solves the problem with a makeshift flamethrower. They take the opportunity to eat while listening to Dan's favorite conspiracy radio show. The host blames the zombie outbreak on terrorists and interviews the security minister, who dodges every question with vague, meaningless answers. Suspicious, the host speculates that the government will abandon the citizens to eliminate the infected area. Dan decides to call the station, reporting that there are survivors in need of help. However, the host claims that the rest of the world fears the infection and refuses to support anyone without first understanding the situation. Frustrated, Dan ends the call. Dan and Andre then discuss their next move, agreeing that they must uncover the cause of the outbreak so an antidote can be developed. Dan realizes the infection must be waterborne. It's the only thing everyone has in common. He wasn't affected because he refuses to drink tap water due to his paranoia, and Andre only drinks soda. Dan even suggests terrorists might have poisoned the water, but Andre dismisses the idea as ridiculous. Shortly after, the three leave the store with Patricia, whose head is locked in a cage to prevent bites. Suddenly, a little zombie girl lunges at Dan. He quickly pushes her away, but can't bring himself to kill her. The group rushes into Dan's car and speeds off before the zombies can react. Meanwhile, a pair of armed twins working for the biotech company arrive at the golf course, effortlessly eliminating any zombies in their path. Inside, Michel frantically destroys all documents and contracts linking him to the club, but he secretly keeps a small portion of the fertilizer. The twins find Michel quickly. Desperate, he grabs one of their bags, discovering it contains capsules with a cure that can end the infection in 24 hours. Before he can take one, the twins catch him and force him to swallow the fertilizer, knocking him unconscious before dragging him away. As they leave, one of the capsules rolls across the floor. Meanwhile, Dan and Andre arrive at the water treatment station and decide to leave Annie in the car, fearing her cries will attract zombies. Since they can't leave Patricia alone with the baby, they all enter the building together. Inside, a zombie covered in grass hides in the water. Patricia notices it and suddenly takes off running. Dan and Andre have no choice but to chase after her. She finds the pool and jumps in, forcing Dan to dive in after her. Suddenly, the grass-covered zombie resurfaces and nearly bites Dan. Thinking fast, he places Patricia in front of him, and the zombie loses interest. Andre realizes that zombies don't attack each other, but when he gets too close, the creature turns its attention to him. More zombies join the chase as Andre flees. Dan struggles to pull Patricia out of the water but accidentally rips off her arm. Andre reaches the car and hides inside, and moments later, Dan emerges, using Patricia's body as a shield to keep the zombies at bay. Once inside, they take a moment to catch their breath. That's when Andre hears a sound, Patricia's cell phone. He grabs it and uses her severed hand to unlock it. To his shock, he notices grass growing inside her wounds. Dan finds it strange to see grass in the middle of winter until he recalls the newest fertilizer at the golf club. Realization strikes. This isn't the work of terrorists, but of the golfers themselves. At the golf course, the twins begin destroying the capsules and grass, eliminating all evidence. Soon after, Dan's group arrives and spots the strange smoke rising from the ground. Andre quickly starts recording everything. They rush to the front door, but it's locked, so Dan climbs onto the roof and enters through another way. He unlocks the door for the others, then locks Patricia in a storage room while Andre builds a makeshift enclosure for Annie using chairs. Dan and Andre search the building and find the dog, still alive but covered in grass. Suddenly, Dan feels dizzy while Annie hiccups in distress. Andre rushes to comfort her, only to realize she has escaped the enclosure. Panicked, he runs off to find his sister. Meanwhile, Dan stumbles into a dark corridor and discovers explosives rigged to detonate the entire building. Weak and unable to stand, he desperately uses Patricia's severed arm to disable the bomb just as his eyes begin turning green. Outside, the twins realize the building hasn't exploded and return to investigate. They find Annie in the kitchen and force her to eat the fertilizer before leaving. Elsewhere, Andre continues his search and comes across Michel, now a zombie, trapped in a locked room. Horrified, he runs in the opposite direction and finally finds Annie. He quickly takes her away, but soon encounters the twins, who block his path. They cover Annie's mouth and attempt to force-feed Andre the fertilizer. Before they can, Annie suddenly transforms into a zombie and bites off one of the twins' fingers. The other twin nearly gets bitten by Dan, who has also turned. As Andre stumbles backward, he accidentally steps on the cure capsule, releasing a cloud of smoke that begins reversing the effects of the fertilizer on Annie and Dan. Dan, still partially zombified, chases Andre into the kitchen but hesitates to attack when he sees Annie nearby. Meanwhile, the remaining twin, realizing there's no escape, grabs a gun and shoots herself just as she begins to turn. Andre then retrieves Dan's old cell phone and calls Patricia's number, using it to record a video explaining everything and pleading for help. The footage makes its way to the news. Andre brings Dan to the warehouse to stay with Annie. Soon, military helicopters arrive for a disinfection operation. However, instead of rescuing survivors, a team of soldiers equipped with flamethrowers incinerates every zombie they encounter. The cure works, and Annie fully recovers, letting out a cry. At the golf club, Dan also begins to heal, but before he can react, the soldiers burst in and burn him alive, along with Patricia. The head of public security soon announces that the contamination has been contained and eradicated. However, as he sips his coffee, the camera reveals the cup's logo, the same biotechnology company responsible for the fertilizer, suggesting he was involved in the cover-up all along. Andre continues walking through the wreckage, passing the corpses of other survivors executed by the soldiers. Suddenly, he spots something in the river, a volunteer rescue boat, commanded by Annie's caretaker. Without hesitation, they pull him aboard. As they leave the island, Andre realizes the severed arm is now useless. He tosses it into the water, where a fish bites into it. Moments later, the fish's eyes turn cloudy, and it begins thrashing violently. The infection isn't over. And so the movie ends. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the story. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more videos.